Welcome to our winter edition of Secure Correspondence. I'm super excited today. I'm joined by one of my favorite colleagues at Trace3, Asher Lohman. He's the vice president of Trace3's data and analytics practice. And his team is really focused on making the most efficient and effective use of what I consider to be an organization's most important currency, and that is data. So, Asher, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Brian. Glad to be here today. I appreciate you inviting me on.
And now you have some sort of quote, I'm told, right, Asher? What's the quote that you've been talking to our customers about?
That's right. At Evolve, I mentioned that data is the new soil. We've heard it over and over again that data is the new oil, and it's kind of very expensive and a good currency that organizations are going after. But I actually think it's more than that. It is really what organizations will be using for growth and for change, and for their organizations to be up leveled and have more competition in the marketplace. So that's the quote. Data is the new soil.
I love it. I love it. I can definitely get behind that. You know, being a security practitioner and having worked in this business for over 20 years, data has always been at the center of where we focus our attention. And security programs have been focusing on data ever since security has been a thing. And yet it still seems as challenging today as it ever has been. What do you attribute the continued challenge to?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that I think come to the forefront of my mind when I think about how security organizations really need to control the data in a different way. So it's become very ubiquitous. Data is now kind of everywhere. Uh, Historically, it's been on premise, it's been in servers, it's been secured behind the network firewall. But now with the expansion of the cloud and all these SaaS tools, it's really traversing lots of different types of managed devices, unmanaged devices. We now have limited visibility sometimes end to end on how data is moving throughout an organization. And there's a number of reasons for that. I think the remote work change actually really was what precipitated a lot of organizations needing to think about their data posture a little bit differently. Now we've got fairly sensitive data being accessed from different networks that are unknown, from different devices that may not be managed, and it's definitely a threat that has to be taken care of. Another thing that I've kind of seen is now we're seeing just the sheer volume of data. Again, throwing back to my Evolve talk, I talked quite a bit about how organizations are going to need to be able to manage this massive growing types of data that their organizations are going to be generating. And the variety is different. Now it's not just structured data. There's lots of video and audio and other types of unstructured data that now need to be managed, because these could also be sensitive. They also could have crown jewel information in them. So I think that across the board, it is a bigger threat landscape than has ever existed for an organization. And it's going to be really difficult to maintain that, at the same time maintaining all these changes to regulations and these other compliance requirements. It's definitely a big job.
Yeah, it can be daunting when you think about the variety and volume of data that most of our organizations are housing and using. So there's a fairly new concept being discussed that is designed to help simplify data security and at the same time make it more cost effective to access and derive analytics from. Asher, can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. This is a great one, because it's now taking aspects of traditional data and analytics and then merging them with the security organization in a new model called the cybersecurity data lake. So we've traditionally had SIMs and other big platforms that we've used to manage our data, our security logs, our security events, and other things that are happening. But now we've got this new approach. It's fairly innovative, taking those aspects of data and analytics efficiencies, like how we process data quickly, how we scale data platforms as the volume increases, and then, like you said, make it much more cost effective. We're seeing a huge success there. Another thing that I like about this model is now we are talking about integrations. We mentioned the SaaS platforms generating data. That's another vector of data that's coming in for a SIM that needs to be managed. Now we've got things from network devices, from user endpoints, all that data feeding together, we can now merge it into a centralized data repository and then put our analytical tools on top of that to do those use cases that we're traditionally like to do, like the threat detection and response, managing incidents, even understanding compliance and risk assessment, and all those other things that we would want from a use case. We can do it now in a data lake model. And like you said, the cost implications are important, and they're actually what are driving a lot of our customers to consider this new model. As an example, we have one customer that had a 50% reduction in cost from their traditional, even cloud-based SIEM. It was a combination of cloud and on-prem, but 50% reduction in cost with doubling the amount of hot data that they could view and extending that for a longer period of visibility. So with that, I mean, it seems like a really interesting paradigm shift from where customers have traditionally been, and it's a pretty cool model. I think that's one that we will see a lot of adoption starting. We already see it, and I think we'll continue seeing that be the new model.
It almost sounds too good to be true. In my last couple of corporate CISO jobs, I was often put into an uncomfortable position of having to pick and choose what
Mm,
data sources I was able to pull into my SIM because it was ingestion based costing model.
right.
And it makes a security leader very uncomfortable to have to say, well, I want this log, but I don't want this log. And I think what you're saying in this model is you don't necessarily have to pick and choose. It's cost effective enough where you can pretty much evaluate every data source that you want.
Exactly. And I think the unique things are now it gives you some new ways to think about your data. Now you can look at long term implications, and we'll talk probably a little bit about how AI might have a play in that.
Mhm,
But now we are opening up those toolkits that we didn't have before to allow for that inspection.
mhm. All right, look, don't skip ahead and start talking about AI. It's on the list. We're going to get there. But I do want to ask you about how organizations can go about evaluating their compatibility with a cyber data lake model. I mean, is there a methodology or an approach that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think that as an organization, you need to understand a little bit about your maturity in a few spaces. So, how comfortable are you leveraging cloud models or cloud platforms? Are there already existing data platforms that your organization is using, like a Snowflake or something like that, to be able to do your regular data analytics? Now, it's easier to bring those to bear when you already have them in the organization. You also need to have a really good understanding of the types of data that you're bringing in, the sources of that, what the volume of that data looks like. And then on top of that, are there certain regulatory requirements that you need to fit in within your industry? Maybe you need a platform that's HIPAA compliant or PCI compliant or FedRAMP compliant. Those are important aspects of what you would bring in to use a platform like this. And then I think at the end of the day, you really should lean on a partner like a Trace3 to kind of bring that deep security and data analytics expertise together. It helps with migrating or navigating migration. So going from current to future, even the combination, there are different patterns that you can use to take advantage of the SIM you have today, maybe stop pumping data into it, migrate to the new platform, and then shift over and not lose that visibility in the interim. So there's lots of different techniques that you can do, but overall, I think there definitely needs to be a maturity within cloud and analytics to start. But I've also seen a lot of organizations that are fairly small that haven't really had a strong security operations practice or don't have a SIM today. It's a great entry point into
Mhm.
that space. So starting with the cybersecurity data lake versus going a different route first.
Is this something you can ease into, or is this like a big bang thing? I mean, could I start doing this with a data source or a couple of data sources and migrate over time? Or do you recommend, hey, just bring everything over at once and it's a big bang approach?
Yeah, I think that there's value to kind of making a bigger shift all at one time because it gives you a better visibility into the
Mhm.
landscape as a whole. But we do have techniques for allowing for federated search between maybe your old system and your new system as you bring data over, so that it still feels like a single system. And I think that if you do it that way, you don't lose the value of the cybersecurity data lake, but you still maintain what you had.
Got it. Okay. Well, it's good that there's flexibility in the approach and mindset in moving to this model. Okay.
Definitely.
Well, we can't talk about security and data without bringing up the topic of automated intelligence, AI. Are you seeing AI playing an increased role in securing data? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I think that at this stage in the game, AI and data security is so pivotal that it's almost table stakes for any security organization to be leveraging. It has to be part of the process.
Mhm.
And there's a few reasons behind it. I mean, I think the enhancements that it brings to the table for doing like threat detection and response, we're moving past traditional signature or role based markers for finding threats, and we're moving towards AI's ability to learn and adapt and to look for those anomalies over a much larger set of data than a person can look at. So it's basically bringing to bear what probably 100 different analysts could do with one solution that can look through and weed through that data and say, hey, I'm seeing a pattern. Maybe this person would never be able to pick out that pattern. It's similar to what we see in a lot of just traditional data and analytics, and then layering the AI on top of that, it draws out things that you may not have been able to correlate. So I think that's a super important part of it as we think about what AI can do.
Yeah, and certainly the bad guys are going to be
Yes.
using AI to enhance their attack approaches and vectors and sophistication. So it only makes sense that we're also using AI, and actually this could be an opportunity maybe for us to catch up and be a little more proactive. A lot of what we do in the security world is reactive or detective, and so I've heard a lot of great things about security tools and technologies that are actually helping to predict an attack that might be happening based on huge volumes of data and models that they're able to take advantage of. So
Yeah, there's
fantastic.
that, and I also think that it's the next phase too. It's even before an attack is happening. How do I bring in a technology that can understand historical patterns, what trends are happening in the market,
Mhm.
and then predict areas of vulnerability for me and give me some mitigation opportunities or mitigate it for me. Those are different things that these technologies can do. Because you're right, being able to counteract an AI threat coming in with AI is critical.
Awesome. Well, in an upcoming episode of Secure Correspondence, I'll be talking with our Chief Technology Officer, Tony Olzak, and we're going to spend the entire session on AI and automation. And so that should be a great session. Asher, I really want to thank you. It's fantastic the partnership that we have at Trace3 between our security and networking practice and our data and analytics practice. Obviously, for our customers out there, we'd love to help you look at your data environment, help you secure it in a cost-effective way. Asher, any last-minute thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, just remember, data is the new soil. We got to take advantage of it, but we also got to secure it. So thanks, Brian. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.